Revving up your engine, listening to her howling roar. Metal under tension, begging you to touch and go. Highway to the Seafront Arcade down in Southend. Afterburner is another classic late 80s Sega arcade title from Yu Suzuki that helped put the publisher on the map. Originally released in July 1987 and then again in September 1987 with added throttle controls as Afterburner 2, few would argue that the game isn't one of Sega's most endearing titles. Very much inspired by 1986's Top Gun, no flying game of the era could compete with the speed and spectacle of Afterburner, especially in its hydraulic Taycan setup which threw the player around, adding to the sheer extravagance of the action. Let's not mention that the game is brutally difficult and that the third-person perspective obscures incoming enemy fire, making it kind of impossible to see everything, because that's not what Afterburner is about. It is pure action and excitement distilled into a game that has theme park level attraction to it. So of course it saw home ports, and these were largely for home computers that couldn't really do a game this intense the justice it deserves. Afterburner is another of Yu Suzuki's superscalar games, and it throws around a huge amount of sprites with a smoothly rotating horizon that help simulate the banking and barrel rolls you perform in the F-14 Tomcat. Outside of the 1989 X68000 port, nothing was coming close to arcade accuracy, and even then the X68000 port could only really be enjoyed by a Japanese audience with a lot of cash to throw around. Once again, it was the Mega Drive that was the first system to really come close to replicating the action of Afterburner at home on a system that was readily available worldwide and for a price that wasn't going to bankrupt you. The 1990 port of Afterburner 2 is a seriously impressive showing for a console that can't do sprite scaling. In our previous video about the Mega Drive port of Outrun, I erroneously said that the game was 60 FPS in arcades, mainly because my familiarity with that version is largely down to the 3DS and Switch ports, which are enhanced to run at 60 FPS. However, Afterburner in arcades is a 60 FPS superscalar game, and once again the frame rate takes a hit in the Mega Drive port, but the speed, intensity, throttle control and smooth horizon rotation are all present and accounted for. As a result, this feels incredibly close to its arcade counterpart, and is really responsive despite the 30 frames per second cap. Yes, some detail has been lost and there's not as many sprites on screen at any given point, but what survives the cut still feels remarkably like Afterburner, running on hardware that really shouldn't be able to pull all this off. The Mega Drive port also boasts support for one of the most obscure and bizarre peripherals I've never had the pleasure of using, the XE1 AP. This analog controller, manufactured by Demper, was supported by a select few Mega Drive, Mega CD and 32X titles, but gives players the use of an analog thumbstick for movement and an analog slider for throttle control. Afterburner 2 on Mega Drive may not be the best version of Afterburner, but it's a damn fine version that plays exceptionally well despite some minor cutbacks to visuals and performance. It certainly made the PC, Amiga, Atari ST and Famicom ports that came before it look pretty obsolete in 1990, and it wouldn't really be bested until the 32X port in 1995. Well, if you ignore the X68000 port, which nobody outside of Japan could really experience. If you look at Afterburner 2 for Mega Drive in this context, you can really appreciate how impressive it was for the time, and thankfully it's still a fun game to revisit nowadays.